We are reading chapter 3, starting chapter 3 of my favorite book, Sugar Hill. And this is a really, really old book, like I said before. Like you can see, my pages are all um, falling apart out of here. But this is just an old book from like before I was born. I think it was like 1974 or something. It was before I was born. But I happened to run across this book because when I was little in high school, my neighbor was moving and she had so many books. And so she just kind of gave us all these books. And I ran across this book probably, I just it reminded me of the movie called Sugar Hill. And I was like, what is that about? And so I started reading it, and that's when I realized that I loved historical fiction. So the last time we left off, Marie's feet was all messed up, and it started to rain and storm, and they found a cave, and they started to, go into the cave, and they had to run all the bats out, which was gross, and they had to soak Marie's feet using bat poop and hot water. But we end with a little bit of foreshadowing because Ben was trying to think about what was going to happen in the future. So he was apprehensive. He was kind of worried about what was going to happen to him in the future. So on to chapter 3. The rain stopped sometime before dawn. Almost as suddenly as it had begun, Flambe was awakened by the abrupt quiet. He glanced at the fire and was satisfied it was still burning. He got up, stretched, and nudged Ben and Marie with his foot. Get up, get up. We might as well get started. The rain has stopped. But it was still dark. But it's still dark, groaned Marie. She complained so much, but whatever, I guess. Because if you got a damsel, then that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a complainer. Um, it won't be long. Ben turned to Marie. How are your feet? They feel better, she said incredulously. Ben lifted one of her feet and looked at it by the light of the embers. They do look better. They look healed. But, he exclaimed, I wonder if bat poop can really help heal. Why, of course, replied Flambe proudly. Do you think I was do you think I would put her through such an ordeal for nothing? Stand up, Marie, urged Ben. See how they feel. Marie got to her feet. They're so much better, she cried with relief. Oh, so very much better. I think I can walk on them now. Good, said Flambe gruffly, and walk we will. We must get down to the mountainside by nightfall. God, would I enjoy a fresh brewed cup of coffee, said Ben, licking his lips. Ooh, it seemed like his mouth would be dry. I don't know. Whatever. They've been eating good, so maybe his mouth isn't dry. And they just had this big old rain last night, so they had plenty of water. But they slept on top of bat doo-doo, so they should be stinking. Me? I would prefer tea, chirped Marie gaily. Tea and a lovely hot bun. Oh, wouldn't that be delicious? Enough gabbing. Let's get going, ordered Flambe. Ben, you load up the donkey, and Marie, you extinguish the fire. Orders, 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 complained Marie. She glanced at Flambe scornfully. I can't wait until we reach Montego Bay. Some time later, they reached the side of the mountain. It was strewn with giant rocks, the result of a landslide. We'll go down here, said Flambe. The rocks will be buffers against the muddy earth. The earth beneath their feet was like a thick pudding. Even when they stepped in large patches of grass, they sank several inches, and the water seeped up almost to their ankles. Flambe cut lengths, lengths, Flambe cut lengths at, I'm sorry, Flambe cut lengths of resilient vine and ordered them to tie themselves together, just like men who climb mountains. The donkey, fearful of the descent, I'm sorry, the donkey, fearful of the descent, had to be beaten into submission. "We'll send him first," said Flambe. "If there are any loose stones or ground, we'll know soon enough." That was probably a good idea. "But we can't lose the donkey," exclaimed Ben. "Better the donkey than us," replied Flambe. They began the perilous descent, sliding from rock to rock, scraping their legs and hands on the rough surfaces. By midday, they were halfway down the mountain, and all of them felt somewhat relieved. Then the sound of the drums started. The drums. "What's that?" asked Marie sharply. She cocked her head to one side and listened to the hypnotic beat. "It's the drums," said Flambe. "We must be approaching a village." "Are they friendly?" asked Ben. Flambe smiled thinly. "I rather doubt it." All of them, including the donkey, lifted their heads and listened. It was a slow, steady 1, 2, 3 beat, with the emphasis on the third. Its sound became stronger as they continued climbing down the mountain. After a while, the drums began to work on Marie's nerves. "Why don't they stop?" she groaned. "They just go on and on and on. The same terrible beat. When will they stop?" Flambe is supposed to know. "I've been told it's more dangerous for us when they do stop." "What do you mean?" she asked sharply. My thought is, what do you think he means? "It means," he replied, "they will come looking for us." "What kind of natives live around here, Captain?" asked Ben. "Descendants of the Arawaks, I imagine. From what I've heard, iguanas aren't the only things they eat. They eat people." Marie looked up. Her face was smeared with mud. She nearly resembled a native herself. "Do you mean they're cannibals?" "So I've been told," replied Flambe. "Watch this rock. It's loose." They climbed over a large rock the size of a banquet table. The rock moved slightly as Ben climbed over it. "Careful, Marie. It's ready to leave its resting place." "Well, I'm much lighter than you are, Ben," she called back, easing herself over the curved surface of the rock. Suddenly the rock began to move. "Ben, it's coming loose!" The rock slid from its place. "Jump, Marie, jump!" yelled Ben. Marie looked about in a panic, still clinging to the moving rock. "I can't!" she cried. "Jump, gosh darn it!" Except he didn't say gosh darn it, he said the other word. Flambe roared. "Marie, let go of the moving rock and jump into space." The rock flew into space and went tumbling down the mountain. Marie suddenly jerked to a halt. The vine tied to her waist held her fast like a puppet on a string. Flambe and Ben were both holding on to the trunks of the gnarled trees. They began pulling, and Marie could feel the vine about her waist coming loose. She grabbed its end and held on. Frightened of heights, she did not look down, but prayed fervently to herself as she raised inch by inch to where Flambe and Ben stood, clinging to the trees. They reached out, each taking one of her hands to pull her to safety. I was almost killed, she shuddered. Oh, Flambe, I'm so glad you tied us together with that vine. Otherwise, she burst into sobs. Ben held her tightly, running his fingers through her mud-spattered hair. Steady, Marie, steady. It's all over. You're safe now. They began the descent once again into the valley below. Their ears had their their ears had become so used to the sound of drums they had almost forgotten about them. But they were still there threatening. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they had reached the bottom of the mountainside. The captain looked back at the mountain in triumph. Well, you son of a bleep, you didn't lick us. The drums, said Marie fearfully. They're all around us now. Which direction do we go, Captain? Asked Ben. Straight ahead. Flambe led. Using the machete, he cut aside clumps of bamboo and mangrove. So in Jamaica, they had bamboo. I'll have to look that up. We're in a swamp, he warned. Watch out for crocodiles and bogs. The drums became faster, a rhythm of frenzy. Dragging the donkey, the trio hurried across the wet sandy ground. Marie half stumbled, half ran to keep up with the men. Frightened by the sound of the drums, the donkey needed no urging. It was all Flambe could do to restrain the beast from dashing wildly into the swamp and becoming lost. Look! Screamed Marie. She pointed her shaking finger at a hideous mask made from a human skull and wood and shells. Paphia had been affixed to the masked skull as hair and had been tied to the limb of the yoke tree. It was swinging slightly in the breeze. Rather a ferocious calling card, I'd say, said Flambe. Come, the faster we get through this part of the country, the better. Listen, said Ben, his eyes widening in horror. What? Asked Flambe. The drums. They've stopped. Then let's move. As they hurried through the underbrush, it tore at their faces and entangled their steps. They were aware of not being alone. Several other such masks, strategically placed, marked their route. Suddenly, Ben cried out. Flambe and Marie turned around where he had been running to the right of them. He was caught up to his waist in one of the swamp's sucking bogs. Help me out of here, Flambe! Please, don't leave me. Flambe stopped, turned away from Ben, and started to move forward. He stopped once again. Please, Flambe, help him, urged Marie. Ben had already sunk to his chest. Quick, Flambe cried. Throw him something to hold on to. Marie picked up a broken bamboo stalk and thrust it at Ben. He grabbed it and held on tightly. Flambe began cutting bits of bamboo and throwing them on the top of the bog. He's sinking, cried Marie. Help me! Help me hold him up! Flambe grabbed Marie's end of the bamboo stick, and both of them began pulling with all their might. Ben had sunk up to his shoulders. He could feel the weight of the sucking bog as it pulled his body down. His hands were slippery with the mud, and he lost his grasp of the bamboo. In a panic, He began flailing about, which caused him to sink even further into the bog. His arms went beneath the surface of the thick brown mud. Ben cried, "Flambe! Take hold of the stick again." "I can't. I can't lift my arms." "You must." The veins in Ben's forehead stood out as he tried to push his arms up to raise them above the surface of the mud. The captain poked the tip of the pole beneath the surface for Ben to grasp the bamboo. Ben's fingers touched the end of the pole, and he was able to wrap his hand around them. And I'm going to stop right there, and then I'll continue chapter 3, part 2 next time.